Hi, it's Frank. Once again, we're going to talk about chords, those three-note chords known as triads specifically, and we're going to be looking at various ways to continue playing inversions when we want to move around the neck. So what we're really doing is looking at three shapes on different string sets. Just to be clear, a string set is when we're working with just one group of strings. In this case, we're going to work with strings 1, 2, and 3 first. Then we're going to look at the same kind of chords, major chord, on strings 2, 3, and 4. Each is going to have a slightly different shape, even though we're only working with major chords, and specifically C major. The reason for that, of course, is because the second string on the guitar is tuned a little differently than the strings around it. So that gives us some different shapes, depending on which set of strings we're working with. So, a lot of what I'm going to talk today relies on you having seen some of the previous videos that I've done, and specifically those videos, of course, dealt with constructing major, minor, and diminished chords, and then introduced the idea of an inversion. Just to recap some of that, the most pertinent stuff. The major and minor and diminished chords are all built on intervals, and the intervals are different for each chord. The intervals rely on understanding how we use scales to basically identify the distance from one note to the next note. A quick summation of that is when we look at C, we had a C major chord that was the triad beginning with C, going up a major third to E, and then a minor third to G. That was major third, 2 whole steps, and then E to G was 1.5 steps. Then when we went to minor, the idea was we went ahead and, in the case of a D as a dog minor chord, flipped those two particular intervals around. D up to F is a minor third distance, whereas F to A, the next two notes in that triad, is a major third. For diminished chords, all we did was take the distances and reduce it to one interval. That is to say, all we have to do to build the diminished triad is take a minor third, let's start with B as in boy, go up to D, because that's the minor third distance, 1.5 steps, and then from there, go up another minor third, which would be the distance from D to F. And in the previous videos, we looked at how to voice those just going up from the first position, root position, through the first inversion and then the second inversion. That's as many inversions as we can get when we work with a minor, major, or diminished triad. Well, today what we're going to do specifically, like I said, is focus on the major triad, C major, but we're going to see how we can move it around the neck, beginning with the string sets that are 1, 2, and 3. So the first thing to do is to locate the root so we can try it in root position. And just so you know, as usual, there's a PDF link in the description for this video. So go ahead and look at that either while I'm discussing this or after. The point is visualizing it with something like that can be really helpful. That features both, by the way, notation as well as tab, just to make reading these notes, especially as we move higher on the neck, a lot easier. So for C, we already know the low C is on the 3rd fret of the 5th string. Easy way to find the octave in that case is just to move up 2 frets to fret 5 and then skip the next string to get to the 3rd string. There's a C, there's another C. This C, which is located on the 5th fret of the 3rd string, is going to serve as our new root. From there, we're going to have C to E, but instead of playing it as an open note on the 1st string open, we're going to play the 5th fret of the 2nd string. We're then going to add G on top. This G right here is on the 3rd fret of the 1st string. So once again, I've got the 5th fret of strings 3 and 2, and the 1st fret of string 3. When I sound those 3 notes, it's the same 3 notes in the same order as C, E, G down here. You can see that already there's a different shape. I'm spread out a little more. Now I'm using these 2 fingers, ring and pinky, to play the low notes, but it's just as common, certainly as you move up the neck, to use these 2 fingers to play the low notes. So whichever, to begin with, is most comfortable for you. The main thing is to notice the shape here differs from what we saw down here when we were working with the root position C chord initially. From here, I know the next note has to be E as an elephant. To find that note along the same string where a C was, I could simply go up 2 whole steps to D and then E, like that. Or, of course, I can always just play the note here and try and locate it along the string. Whichever way works best for you at this point. All of this is going to expand your knowledge of where notes are on the neck, so you'll get to the information you need, even if you're doing it a little bit differently than me to start with. E on the 3rd string is located on the 9th fret. From there, the next 2 notes I need are G on the 8th fret and then C on the 8th fret of the 1st string. So we get the This is the first inversion of C that we talked about in the previous video. Notice the shape here differs from this shape. Here it's one finger, most likely your second finger, on the third string, and then a mini bar shape, first finger covering strings 1 and 2 at the 8th fret. Same 3 notes, again, first inversion, just like we talked about previously. The next inversion is going to be the second inversion. That means G is going to be the low note. Turns out, you probably already know, G is the third string open, which means if I go to the 12th fret, I'm simply playing the octave. The other neat thing about the second inversion here, much like I've discussed a couple times in previous videos when I mentioned how a D as in dog first position chord is technically a second inversion D chord, all I have to do is use that same shape up here so that my first finger is on the 12th fret of the third string, my middle finger is on the 12th fret of the first string, and then my ring finger is on the 13th fret of the second string. It's a general rule, by the way, when you're working on notes above the 12th fret, if you subtract 12, you can get a feel for where they are down here. For instance, the 13th fret minus 12 is the first fret of the same string. Okay? We'll be using that more as we keep working up higher on the neck. So once again, here is the second inversion of a C chord. And this one, once again, along the first 3 strings. So putting those together then, we have a root position C chord. We have the first inversion C chord. And then we have the second inversion, which looks like a D chord, which, by the way, I can also play using a mini bar shape, covering the first 3 strings, whatever's more comfortable for you. From there now, we're going to move the same 3 notes to string set that includes strings 2, 3, and 4. So for this one, I'm going to start with a C note, which is located, just to save us a step, on the 10th fret of the 4th string. That, by the way, is the octave of the low C on the 8th fret of the 6th string. Similar shape that I used when I found the C here, by the way. Okay? 2 frets higher, and skipping 1 string. In this case, from here on the 6th string, I go up to the 10th fret, skipping the 5th string, and now I'm on the 4th. So here, the C major triad looks like C, E, G. 10th fret, 9th fret, 8th fret from strings 4, 3 to 2. So a little bit different than when I played it down here. Again, that's due to the nature of how the second string on the guitar is tuned. From here, I'm actually going to go up kind of high. I'm going to go ahead and move all the way up to the 14th fret of the 4th string, because that's where I can locate E. E, of course, is a step 2 frets above D, which is the 12th fret of the same string. So there's my E, there's my G, and there's C. And that's 14, 12, and 13. This is pretty far up. But another way to think of this, if I use the little math trick I mentioned a moment ago, is to take 14 and subtract 12. That takes me down to the 2nd fret. 12 minus 12 is the same as 0, but in music we think of that 0 as an O for open. So that's the 3rd string open. And then the last note of this shape up here was 13. 13, as already mentioned, minus 12 is the 1st fret. If you think back to the previous video, this was how we played a first inversion C chord in open position. Here all we're doing is playing the same shape an octave higher, and we don't have the open string, which is why I'm using the 3 fingers. For the next shape, rather than continue up the neck, which can be a little bit limited on an acoustic guitar especially, I'm actually going to drop down an octave. So I already know that the 3rd fret of the 4th string is F. E is right before it, F comes after that on the 3rd fret, which means if I go up a step, 2 frets, I arrive at G on the 4th string. I also know that the second inversion C chord has the notes in the order of G, C, E. Notice I'm using a bar shape with my 3rd finger. It could just as easily be my 1st finger. It could also be played as an A chord if you're used to playing A chords in 1st position with these 3 fingers. I just favor a bar shape because I always like to make sure I'm comfortable with bars. It makes moving around the guitar, especially when you're using positions with the 1st finger, easier. So here we have second inversion C chord with the low note being on the 4th string. Once again, to walk through those, our root position on the strings 2, 3, and 4 begins with the 3rd finger on the 10th fret. Continues on to the E at the 14th fret here. 14, 12, 13. And then dropping down 1 octave, I have 5, 5, 5, meaning 5th fret for all 3 notes along strings 4, 3, and 2. All right, so those are the same notes, of course, as these inversions, but simply in different location. And different octave in this case. You can already see the benefit of starting to even memorize just one or two of these in different string sets, because it's going to allow you to move around much more freely on the neck without feeling restricted when you're trying to think, where do I play this kind of major chord? All right? So we'll pick things up in the next video with minor and diminished chords. Hopefully this is helping you and making some sense. Again, if you want some visualization of what I'm doing here on the fretboard and kind of talking through, don't hesitate to click on the link there for the PDF in the description. Take care.